Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to this segment of Code Gurbani's a-sabad-a-day. The Sabd of the day is from Surat Mahalla Panjama, Sabd number 75. It is a short Sabd, quite like the ones that we have considered in the past couple of weeks, and with a similar theme, as we shall see. The recitation: Surat Mahalla Panjama, Sada Sada Har Jaape, Prabh Balak Rakhe Aape, Sitala Thak Rahai, Bigan Gaye Harinai. मेरा प्रभ हुआ सदा दयाला, अरदास सुनी भगत अपने की, सब जी भय कृपाला। रहाओ प्रभ करण कारण समराथा, हर सिमरत सब दुख लाथा। अपने दास की सुनी बेनंती, सब नानक sukh savanti. So the verse begins at the top with Sada Sada Har Jaape, Prabh Balak Rakhe Aape, Sitala Thak Rahai, Bigan Gaye Harinai. The literal translation of this would be, when the Har self, the essence within, is realized to be ever present. Sada Sada Har Jaape. And we'll talk about the word Jaape. When you realize or come to realize that my essence, the Har, is ever present, Sada Sada, then you also realize that this Har self, which is connected to the Prabh, which is more or less synonymous, but there is still a sense of some hierarchy, the Prabh being the supreme self, and the Har being the personal self, most of the times. So what you also realize then is that this ever-present master is protective of its children. Prabh Balak Rakhe Aape. So Sada Sada Har Jaape, Prabh Balak Rakhe Aape. That's the connection. When this realization dawns upon the mind and becomes embedded in the mind, in the heart, if you will, because Gurbani speaks of the heart more than it speaks of the mind, because the mind is something that you want to transcend eventually, because in itself the mind is in error, and all knowing, as far as Gurbani is concerned, happens from the center, which is the heart, the core, not the physical organ. So then what happens is one experiences peace of mind. Sitala Thak Rahai. Thak is permanent. That is where you are. All suffering is overcome, and Bigan Gaye Harinai. All your obstacles are overcome. So now, speaking of Jaape, you'll find that all available English translations of Gurbani have uniformly translated this term as forever, day and night, recite the divine name. Now, such a rendering is misleading. It makes no sense, simply because, just on the logic of it, one cannot physically engage in recitation day and night. It doesn't happen. That's the first thing to remember. I mean, it's not physically possible. But beyond that, recitation or chanting is not advocated in Gurbani. So the word Jaape, in the context of this verse, comes from the Punjabi Japana. Japana, when you become aware of something, manu hai japada, to see, to become aware of. So that is why the Sabd is saying, Sada Sada Har Jaape, when you come to this realization. So to see, the suggestion here is one of intuitive awareness. The awareness that one, an individual, is enveloped by a benign and nurturing presence all the time. We live in that presence. And this presence is not visible to the senses, but is felt as a presence. So when you realize that, and you also realize that this presence speaks to us through its wisdom, it's noetic, it's mental, that then enables you to negotiate life successfully. So therefore, Sada Sada Jaape means one needs to be mindful of the wisdom at all times, and to act out of that fulcrum, to act out of wisdom. In the Rahau, the reflective pause, my Prabh self is ever merciful. That is its very nature. Mera Prabh hua, it is Sada Dayala, ever merciful. It hears the supplication, the petition of its devotees, the heart's call. It's not like you're reading out a petition, but the longing of your heart is petitioning the Prabh. And so it is always, when it says it hears, it means it's receptive. It responds. And it responds compassionately. Sabji bhai kripalla. So the response is always a compassionate one, like a parent, an understanding one. In fact, parents ought to take a leaf out of this book. So the divine parent is endlessly compassionate, always receptive to heartfelt calls. So it responds with tender care, but extends this to all beings. So there is a practical dynamic. This relationship is a dynamic one. It's not static. It's not something that you just know in your intellect that, oh, I'm surrounded by a presence. You actually feel it. You live it. It's experiential. That's the training that one has to give the mind. And in conclusion, a description of the first cause, the self. It is the first cause, Karan. It is also Karan. Prabh Karan Karan. It is the cause of all causes. In other words, it's the source of everything that happens. It is all powerful and all skillful, Samratha. Now, when we talk about knowing from the heart, Gurbani uses the word Simran or Simrat. Har Simrat sab dukh latha. The belief is that knowledge of the Har, knowledge of this wisdom, is already innate in you. It's not something that you have to discover anew. This universal form of knowledge, of wisdom, is already embedded in you. In fact, it is woven into you. So you have to recollect it, remember it. So Simran is a remembrance of what is already there. That presence, that essence. That essence knows everything. It knows all of the universal forms, which is another way of describing Nam. It defines everything. So it knows. So this first cause is the cause of everything. And through remembrance and recollection, you can connect with it. And when that happens, Har Simrat sab dukh latha, all suffering departs. Then Nanak concludes by saying, अपने दास की सुनी बनंती सब नानक सुख सवंती. अपने दास की, listening. Nanak sleeps restfully because savanti, the petition is heard. So this is essentially total sufficiency, the ability of the presence, the Har, the cause of causes, to transform our lives into well-being. So the divine in this Sabd is the parent, the protector, the healer, and the source of all comfort. And the child, the Balak, is protected. This really, in today's terms, would be the psychological equivalent of a secure attachment, where the child feels consistently protected by a sensitive caregiver. The lesson, the moral for parents, is to behave like the Prabh does, ever receptive, ever attentive, soothing to the child, listening, prayer being heard. Divine always hears, and compassion, understanding for the child. The child not only that is physically that you have, but also the child within, which is your ego. This is how you heal, and healing means expansion of the ego. To look at the world through an expanded consciousness. Vaheguru Ji ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji ki Fateh.